everything is going well for you and God is keeping you healthy and happy on this weekend. All right, we're continuing our series. Just getting adjusted here. Continuing our series on African American empowerment. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and watching some of the videos and supporting some of the videos on here. As a small YouTube channel. For a long time, I didn't really consider even doing YouTube channels, but I figure it's probably a good opportunity to spread some knowledge. So I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to talk about interracial relationships, the unique interracial relationship experience for the African American male. All right. A lot of you younger people don't really do a lot of history research. So a lot of you do, some of you don't. All right. I don't want to generalize, but there is a platform and sort of like a foundation that present day we are all operating from, right? We function off the shoulders of our ancestors. So there have been foundations and certain systems and structures that have been in place, all right, that us as the present generation, we sort of unconsciously function from, all right, just based on the history here in the United States. So it says here I have a little bit of an introduction and some research that I've done for statistics online with online dating, and also a little bit of history of just the unique experience that African American men face when they're dating outside of their race. All right. I myself am in an interracial relationship. My wife, she's from China. We also met online prior to meeting her in my dating relationships. I did have very unique experiences around love. It was almost like, in a way, your love sort of like experience is distorted in a lot of ways because so many women kind of operate from some of the narratives socially that American society kind of programs into them in terms of what they see or what they believe Black men to represent. And not even just in the media. Sometimes you could just grow up, like I grew up in Detroit. So it's not uncommon to see, and not all Detroit is violent, but to see violence and crime. And, people tend to assume that, all Black men are criminals, all Black men are violent. All right. So when you're dating, in America, it's really unique to where it's really hard to find love, I would think, just in general, based off of just human nature, our biases, and different people having different belief systems. Not being Black and just dating in America and in general is already complicated enough. All right. When you add in like race dynamics and discrimination and narratives and social programming, it just makes the shit a lot worse, you know? So, in my honest opinion, I don't believe Black men really have a healthy, sort of pure, experience in love, which is why I believe a lot of Black men tend to jump from relationship to relationship, due to a lot of just, stereotypes and just, trauma around trust and belonging. It's really hard, I believe, for a lot of Black men to even find love, especially when you're in a system where it's not like it was really designed to love your ass to begin with. Right? You're kind of like target, you're like public enemy number one, right? From The Birth of a Nation, from all these different films that sort of targeted the Black man. Motherfuckers wasn't really looking to love you. All right. So I want to break down interracial relationships, the history that I believe contributed to sort of like the barriers a lot of Black men face, and not even just from white women, just from different cultures in general, whether it's Asian women, Hispanic, Latino women, Indian, whoever, there's tend to be a common thread, I think, in terms of like what women sort of expect and assume, when they're dealing with Black guys. All right. So it says, love, the most human of all pursuits, has never been neutral for the African American man. His desire has always been weighed down by history, police, by fear, and misinterpreted through a lens crafted by white supremacy. The Ku Klux Klan didn't just burn crosses, they burned the idea that a Black man's love could ever be seen as innocent, genuine, or worthy. The Birth of a Nation was not just a film, it was a weapon, a cultural declaration that to love across racial lines was to invite violence, and that violence still lingers, coded, rewritten, dressed up in a polite language. All right. carried forward in whispers at dinner tables, in glances at school drop offs, and mothers telling their daughters, be careful who you bring home, right? So, but it is not only outside voices that hurt. Too often, even within the African American community, suspicion seeps in. Some Black women, shaped by generational trauma, shaped by abandonment, shaped by the very stereotypes white supremacy created, look at their sons, their brothers, their fathers, and place limits on what kind of love they deserve. Some mothers, in silence or in outright warning, treat their sons as if the world's stereotypes about them are true. So sometimes you see this even from your Black parents, right? Even from your mothers, your grandparents, right? They might kind of treat you a little bit differently. They might treat people who they see in the media, right, who are white or, different cultures, sometimes you'll see your family treating other members, and this hasn't so much happened to me, but you'll see, where you feel like your family members are loving on other cultures and other races more than they're loving their own people, right? So you see this a lot, even in Black families, right, towards the Black men. Okay, so says treats them like the world stereotypes about them are truth, as if protecting them means restricting them, as if loving or love for them can only survive inside certain boundaries. The irony is sharp. Protection and prejudice often blur, leaving the Black man's heart boxed in from every side. So you're getting it from your families, right? You're getting this shit from the media, from culture. Being a Black man, they need to really make some sort of documentary and film about just loving the Black man in the world that we live in today. All right, who isn't looking for love, right? A lot of you beta ass males from all across the world, right? You're on OnlyFans giving these women millions, right? For what? Your imagination or imaginary concept of love, right? You're filled with lust. You're out here trying to learn how to get game from these different, the game books, and watching these shows on YouTube of men trying to teach you motherfuckers on how to even just approach a woman. And you guys clearly want love. All right, so don't act like you too fucking cool for love and know what the fuck is he talking about. Nah, motherfucker, you know what I'm talking about. All right, so let's break it down. And what happens when this is not spoken about, right? Motherfuckers ain't gonna tell you, hey, I don't want you dating my Black girl, my white daughter, or my Hispanic daughter, or Latino daughter, and they'll tell you. Some motherfuckers will tell you, right? You go to the South and even the West, right? And today you go any fucking where. The parents will let you know they don't want you fucking with their daughters, their sisters, anybody, right? Their mothers. But a lot of times when you guys are socializing and interacting with these different racial groups, they're not gonna tell you outright, hey man, I don't want you fucking with none of the women in my family. All right. So a lot of shit is kept secret. All right. So it says, and what happens when this is not spoken about? When bias, fear, and suspicion are left unaddressed, silence itself can become a weapon. Silence functions as the modern hood. Anonymity without accountability. People say nothing, but they act. They smile publicly, but withhold privately. They let their daughters laugh at Black boys' jokes, but not bring them home. They praise diversity on their jobs, but panic at diversity in their bloodline. This unspoken code, the America of nods and unsaid truths, keeps the old rules alive more effectively than the Klan ever could with fire and rope. America is built on unspoken rules, right? A lot of these rules are unspoken. A lot of people are not telling you the current present day narratives that they're operating from, all right? But everybody in America is off of the heels of their ancestors, all right? These foundations that have been set of racism, prejudice, discrimination based off of how you look, all right? So America is built on unspoken rules, right? And those rules still govern who we marry, who we love, who we accept into our families, okay? The platform was established centuries ago. Protect whiteness, criminalize Blackness, and especially guard against the union of the two. That architecture still stands, even if the builders are long dead. To not confront it openly is to collaborate with it. To not unmask the inherited suspicion is to keep wearing the hood, even in the 21st century. And so the question for us is not simply about interracial relationships. It is about whether we are willing to name the old ghost for what they are, or whether we will keep letting them dictate the love stories of African American men in silence. We cannot ignore that white men are most often cast as the default good choice, right? Study after study on online dating from OkCupid to Pew shows they consistently receive the highest response rates, the highest desirability rankings, and the most yes swipes. This is not accidental. It is the cultural residue of centuries of associating whiteness, and particularly white maleness, with stability, wealth, and resourcefulness. All right. To be white and male is to be presumed competent before you even open up your mouth. All right. Desirable before you even prove it. Okay. And trustworthy before you even earn it. Meanwhile, black men must climb uphill through the noise of stereotypes before they are even granted the possibility of being seen as human in love, right? And I believe this plays into a lot of the white male sort of arrogance, and not all, but a lot of you motherfuckers, you cocky, and black niggas are too, right? But even just in terms of the far right extremists, right? That shit plays into it. You can't tell me if you ain't got women bowing down to your motherfucking ass, you ain't gonna have an ego. Shit, on top of already having power in the infrastructure, having power in society and dominance, right? In Congress, law enforcement, right? Especially in the job market. And you got women falling at your feet. You can't tell me that shit don't affect your ego, right? So a lot of you women, you don't even realize how you play into a lot of the violence and the harassment, right? That a lot of times happens from, the white community towards the black community in terms of just this white supremacy. You don't even know how much you women play into the shit, right? So, um, and people like, they love who they love. So I'm not saying, oh, don't date white boys, or you shouldn't be interested in them because you got to save the black man. No, I'm not telling you that. I'm being objective about the shit. All right. Everything we do, good or bad, has consequences. Okay. And a lot of you women, I know you talking shit too, right? You guys are not innocent in this situation. You're beating down a black man, and then you kind of align with other races and cultures who also hate the black people. So you just further divide the community. Okay. So it says this preference is not merely personal, it is systemic. White men embody the archetype of power, of access, of privilege. And this really can even work against some white people. I'm going to do a series on white people, okay? It can kind of even work against them. You might have white dudes who are like just genuinely, authentically, just good, believing men who just don't could give a damn less about the racial narratives and the stereotypes and all that shit. They just want a good woman, right? But then they're going places and they're looked at as a paycheck, right? They're looked at as well, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to financially provide for me? What are you going to do? You white, you rich, give me some money, right? So even dudes who want to do the right thing and be righteous, right? White men, they're probably like, damn, this shit is set up where it's hard for me to even know what women I can fucking trust, right? So I can see how it can kind of work against them too. So what it says here, the language of provider, high value, and successful has been silently coded to mirror whiteness. On dating platforms where algorithms amplify what users already prefer, these associations are multiplied and reinforced. The digital marketplace of love becomes just another site of racial hierarchy, where the myth of the better pick is replayed over and over in profile matches, message replies, and marriage statistics. Black men are measured not against their character, but against the centuries old silhouette of the white man as the safe, sanctioned partner. And the consequences ripple outward, far beyond romance. When society elevates white men as the standard, it sows division not only between black men and white men, but between men and women of all races. Women are taught to equate safety with whiteness, success with whiteness, family stability with whiteness. Men of color are taught to internalize inferiority or overcompensate by leaning into stereotypes. This fuels resentment, distrust, and competition where there should be solidarity. It fractures communities, turning love into another battlefield of systemic inequality. The modern terms high value man, provider, good on paper are not neutral. They are cultural scripts that quietly maintain racial hierarchies while pretending to describe preferences. Jesus, when questioned by the Sadducees, declared in Matthew 22:30 that in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. This was not simply a theological statement about eternity, it was a piercing commentary on the limitations and distortions of human marriage on earth. All right. If marriage has been so corrupted by prejudice, by systemic discrimination, by centuries of racial hierarchy that has dictated who can love whom, okay, then heaven's release from it is not punishment, but freedom. The absence of marriage, right, in heaven is the removal of the chains, chains forged by white supremacy, cultural preference, social desirability, and silent bias that for generations have suffocated the purity of human relationships. Absolutely. If you guys can't get it right on earth, you can't love each other without having to measure the person's race, their ethnicity, right? You're falling into all these stereotypes and narratives and programming from Disney channels, from movies and film, and from family. What the hell make you think you're gonna be successful in marriage in heaven? Fuck no. You barely can love each other on earth, right? So it makes sense there is no marriage in heaven. You barely even righteously marry on earth without it being fueled by some prejudice or some sort of hatred towards some other group, right? Makes sense. Makes complete sense. When we examine history from the KKK's burning crosses to the lies and the birth of a nation to the silent bias coded into algorithms today, we see that marriage has often been less about love and more about power, status, and race. It has been used as a weapon, a boundary, a tool of division. The fact that heaven strips it away is an indictment of humanity's failure to steward marriage with justice, equality, and truth. In this light, Christ's teaching is both judgment and mercy. All right. Judgment on the systems that pervert love, and mercy on the souls who were never fully allowed to love freely on earth. Can you imagine how it feels like to be a part of the marginalized group, right? And you want to love, you want to have a family, maybe you worked hard in the educational system to develop a good strong career in this world. Maybe you worked hard in trade school, maybe you worked hard saving your money, and you're seeing all the divorces and failed marriages in your family. Maybe you worked hard to be able to provide security for your own family. You're a young man, right? You're in high school, you're kind of trying to learn how to date. Can you imagine just who doesn't want to love and have a family? You have people out there who don't, but I'm talking about the majority, all right? People want to have a family, they want to be loved, right? Rarely do people grow up wanting to graduate to hate, right? They want to be loved, they want to feel accepted, they want to find their partner, right? So if it wasn't true, the shit wouldn't be a $1 billion industry, right? So you do all this work, right, as a young black man to just be presentable, right, to be desirable. And it really starts with loving yourself, brothers. All right. A lot of times you guys put too much emphasis on being accepted and being loved in things that are outside of you, right? It starts within you. Even if a lot of these conditions were removed, if you don't love yourself fully, there's nothing a woman could really do for you, right? And she could continue over functioning, and she could continue giving you compliments, and she can showering you with gifts and all kind of bringing you around family. But if you're not convinced that you're lovable, all you will be doing is just exhausting her out anyway. All right. So this isn't a video about, oh, it's everybody else's fault, black man, why you're not loved, right? It's the systems and all these things. They do play a fucking role in it. All right. Let's not be blind and ignorant. But the most important love starts with you first cherishing and strengthening your relationship to God, right? Because God is love. And then that funneling into you loving yourself as a created being, believing that you were created for a purpose, all right, in this world. And You know, can you imagine you put all this fucking work in, and maybe you do love yourself, and you grow up, and then you get older, you graduate from high school, you launch, and you can't even find love the way you need it because you're black, right? Not because you're abusive, not because you're a fucking harasser or an aggressor, right? Or you're not, prepared enough, or just because of how you fucking look. All right. That's why a lot of times it's hard to take society. Here we go with the fucking phone calls, man. When I'm doing my lives, man, I don't understand. It's hard enough already to, believe. The believability of American culture is really hard for me, because a lot of people say a lot of shit in public to come off like they're so wise and they're so smart, but a lot of times it's shit that people say behind the scenes. Earth, all right, never fully allowed to love freely on earth. Okay, that really hurts, man. So heaven is the place where the walls come down, where the unspoken rules dissolve, and where love is no longer filtered through history's scars. you know so I know a lot of you guys are not going to want to tune in to this because it's the raw truth. All right, thanks a lot, Nightcrawler, I appreciate it. People hate truth. They hate truth. Not all people, but a good portion of people hate truth. So I know you guys are not going to tune in, and you're not going to watch this because um yeah, there's no romance in heaven. Yeah, absolutely. So good morning, man. How you doing, brother? Good to see you. So 10 pieces of research on online dating and race. All right. So OK Cupid, race and attraction. They did studies on this, right? You got companies that are doing studies on this because they know, you better believe, these researchers and scientists that are doing these studies, they know that race plays a big deal in who people choose to decide as a partner, as a spouse, different things like that. So you better believe, a lot of times I even believe these online platforms were designed just for the research, right? Just for the data, right? They know everybody hate niggas, right? So they're like, man, we want to see this shit on paper. We need to get more strength and evidence, man, that we're better. So OK Cupid, race and attraction. This was a study done in 2009 to 2014. Millions of user ratings and messages. What they measured was a cross race attraction and reply rates over time. So key findings across this period: women penalized Black and Asian men in ratings and replies. Non Black men penalized Black women. All right. Some trends improved slightly by 2014, but the rank order persisted. Black men face lower reply probabilities from non Black women than white and Latino counterparts. All right. Why this matters: it establishes a large scale baseline showing structural bias against Black men backed into initial interest and reply behavior. All right. Lynn and Lundquist, American Journal of Sociology, Yahoo Personals. This was from 2003 to 2010. 9 million users and 200 million messages. All right. What they measured: who messages whom and who replies, controlling for education and etc. Key finding: strong racial homophily plus a racial status hierarchy in replies. Homophily, what does that stand for, guys? Homophily? I never even heard of that. What is that? Homophily? Homophily. Homophily is the social principle that people tend to associate with others who are similar to them. Homophily. Okay. Learned a new word. Homophily. I didn't want to be ignorant. So, homophily. But we all do that, right? So they noticed that people tend to, well, it says, unfortunately, we aren't that desire. And a lot of times we are used as a last resort, or we end up with low tier partners of other races. Not always, but I say most of the time. Asian dudes at least be providers and get less general hate in society. Asian men can also get a boost these days because of K pop. The 1980s to late 2000s was a time to be into interracial relationship for black men, and even then, I cannot argue that it was so great. That's well said. Yeah, yeah, that's true, man. It is. That's really true. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, keep some more feedback in the comments, man. Yeah, you're really speaking to it. Yeah, I noticed that like the black guys, they tend to get, and this even become like a stereotype, like where if a black man get a white woman, she fat, she nasty, right? She don't take care of herself, not taking care of her health, right? They get the undesirables, right? Like, okay, we're gonna give you niggas somebody from different cultures. We're gonna give you the undesirables, right? We're not gonna give you the top tier sort of like supermodel, standard, right? You're gonna get that, the leftovers and shit, right? No disrespect to the women out there, but you see it. Women don't want to go out getting the fucking leftovers, right? So it's really not disrespect, but it's okay for the black folks, right? You don't get the good quality, right? Yeah, you absolutely right. And other black dudes call you a traitor, not just for not getting with black women, but for getting quality in other races. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's like if you don't stick with your race as a black man, you're looked at as like a traitor. You're looked at as like you don't love your black people. And then it's like you're not entitled to your own value system and your own sort of like preferences, right? Who doesn't have preferences? Some motherfuckers eat broccoli, some don't. Some people don't eat carbs, and why can't you have your preferences? And it's not wrong for even having preferences if you don't like black people. Everybody's not gonna like black people, right? I understand that. So this isn't saying like, hey, all you people need to fucking love black people. You need to love us. No, everybody has a right to their preferences and their interests, okay? This is just objective data and research and facts, all right, about how history has perverted love and how it's influenced it, all right? You can't separate the history and the facts from what the fuck is going on today, all right? That's why sometimes it's so hard to educate young people, because you motherfuckers, you get so caught up in your opinions and your interests and preferences. You know how to, you know, essentially exploit history, and you try to camouflage it behind sort of like your ability to sort of like articulate, organize words, and make things seem like oh, this is just interest, this is just preference, right? You try to minimalize shit, right? But this is just acknowledging the facts of the situation, all right? Um, so when what they measured, all right, this is from Yahoo Personals, all right. I'm assuming this is like maybe like a little dating sort of like feature that they have on Yahoo. All right. This was a study done in 2003 to 2010, right? What they measured: who messages whom and who replies, controlling for education. All right. So they had like education, they had like these different variables and factors. Okay. Strong racial, so what they found: strong racial homophily plus a racial status hierarchy in replies. Non-black women were least likely to reply to black men compared to the same race men of white, Latino, or Asian cultures. All right. Education did not erase this gap for white users. All right. Why it matters: high quality peer reviewed evidence that response bias disadvantages black men even when credentials are similar. So you might have had brothers who had master's degrees, doctorate degrees, right? Really great educational backgrounds or career backgrounds similar to their white counterparts, right? But they were still less chosen, all right? And I believe a lot of times with women, they really live in fear. These bitches, these females, and a lot of some of you guys are bitches, and not all of you guys, but a lot of you rude females, y'all motherfuckers are some bitches, all right? And some of you dudes are some bitches, all right? So I don't apologize for that. But some of these females, I believe you guys live in fear of your parents, right? You guys act like you're so brave and you're so bold and you do whatever the fuck you want to do and all of this, but you really don't. You care about what your mom thinks, you care about what your dad thinks. You could be 30, 40 fucking years old. You care about what your family thinks and other people think about your relationships and your love relationships, even to the extent of just excluding yourself from certain options. And that's your business. I'm happily married. So I'm not looking for no fucking body. All right. I done been there, done that, dealt with the bullshit. So it ain't for me, right? But it even got to the point where I was just like, I'm done with American women. Done with your motherfucking ass, all right? Because I was tired of the fucking stereotypes. I'm tired of getting measured by your brothers, your uncles, your cousins, and I was tired of this shit. So I'm man enough to admit it. I'm not interested in American women, all right? I respect you. I respect all women, but I'm not looking for love from you guys because I already know what the fuck is going on, all right? That's just me, all right? Think however the fuck you want to feel about it. So It says these things are going to become more solidified because of social media and the ubiquity of the online world. There was a little more room prior to social media taking off like it did. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was tired of the prejudice and the, oh, even from dealing with the black girls, right? You get this shit from the black girls too. I was just fucking tired of it. I was like, you know what? I'm not dating no more American women. I don't give a fuck if I gotta be no relationships, no nothing. So be it. You just get tired of dealing with that emotional, psychological abuse and putting yourself through that shit. All right. Because you don't really know people true nature until you start getting to these love and relationship conversations and shit. So I was done with the shit. Being the non-stereotypical black guy, being educated, etc., actually worked in China to a degree, but this was pre-pandemic. The exotic factor in being American through the wrong kind helped too. Yeah, yeah, I believe that. I've heard about that. Yeah, I've heard about that. So, what it say here? Are you interested? AYI data summarized by Quartz 2013. What they measured, who contacts whom, and who gets responses on a large U.S. dating site. Key finding: Black men and black women receive the fewest responses in their gender categories. Many groups motherfuckers keep calling me during these lives, boy. Y'all guys fucking annoying the fuck out of me, man. All right. So this was a study done on Are You Interested? So it said they measured who contacts whom and who gets responses on a large U.S. dating site. Let me cut off my. I'm gonna have to do not disturb every time I do a fucking video, man, because you motherfuckers just call at the wrong times, man. Yeah, man. I gotta use. Yeah, man. I'm gonna have to invest in like a whole separate technology for my streams, man, because that shit is fucking annoying, man. It really is. I'm gonna find something else. I'm just getting started, man. I'm only like a few months in, man. Give me some time, all right. I'm not gonna come out the gate with all the fancy shit, right? I gotta first even figure out if YouTube is really for me, all right. So I'm gonna work my way up there, all right. So AYI, are you interested? Data summarized by Quartz 2013. What they measured, who contacts who, and who gets responses on a large U.S. dating site. Key finding: Black men and black women received the fewest responses in their gender categories. All right. Many groups showed a marked preference for white men and Asian women. All right. Independent platforms analysis echoing OKCupid and AJS patterns, race penalties for black men. All right. So I have like a why this matters section. Pew Research Center, public views on intermarriage and trends. What they measured: attitudes towards a close relative marrying someone of a different race and intermarriage trends. All right. So they want to see, what do close relatives think about this, right? Because all of these things play into love and relationships, right? These women, these men are thinking about what my auntie gonna think, what my uncle gonna think, what my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, right? This whole family systems influence, right, on love and relationships is a big ass deal in America, man. It's a big deal, especially with the women, all right? So, key findings: while intermarriage has risen, right, a non trivial share still opposes intermarriage. Attitudes vary by race/education. Even if apps or applications widen the pool, offline family attitudes and stigma still depress cross race success, especially salient for Black men facing stereotypes. Five, the Harvard Gazette, 2024. So this was just last year. How dating sites automate sexual racism. What they examined: platform design and ranking algorithms learned from biased user behavior, entrenching lower visibility for disfavored groups, often including Black men. Why it matters: not just user taste. All right. Algorithmic curation can systemically downrank black men, shrinking impressions before the messages even start. So they have some of these online platforms and these online systems will rank somebody. I think guys just tell me like, Randy, don't do lives on your phone, man. They're gonna keep calling you at the wrong times. They're gonna keep throwing your lives off. So I'm just gonna start doing some research on some other devices that I can use. I mean, I have my computer here, but I'm gonna get some other tools, man, because I'm learning from this experience. This is all data. You can't do this shit on your phone, man. Usually I don't have people calling me like this. So yeah, so some of these platforms, these apps, these dating apps have these sort of like design ranking systems, right? That put a lot of the disfavored races at the bottom where you're not even going to be presented or launched to potential partners, right? Based off of your race and your desirability. All right. So a lot of this racism is even embedded in some of the technology, okay, of some of these dating apps. So dataclysm, right? Rudder, OkCupid, big data synthesis. What they analyze: millions of OkCupid interactions summarized for the public. Key findings: persistent race of partner penalties in desirability rankings. Confirms that black users, especially black women and black men with certain age pairings, face lower inbound interest. Why it matters: popular accessible synthesis reinforcing peer-reviewed and platform-native findings useful for on-screen callouts and charts. Large-scale mobile dating mythology. This is in 2009 by Hinge sourced data set paper. Hinge, what they did, showed how massive mobile dating data can trace sorting and preferences. Paper's main focus isn't race, but establishes the technology. Okay. So I think that's enough on that, right? It's pretty much all the data is pretty much saying the same thing. So let's kind of go into the history. Let's go into a little bit of some of the history. Let me see. So we're going to look at sort of like the history that kind of plays into some of the interracial relationship barriers and challenges African American men face in love and relationships across cultures. All right. So we're going to look at some of the news and history um, data on this topic. So we already talked about yesterday, 1915, birth of a nation, right? Hard coded the lie of black male threat to white womanhood and helped revive the KKK. All right. The film was literally used for recruitment. 2, Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champ, was targeted with the Mann Act soon after publicly dating or marrying a white woman. This was in 1912 to 1913. Emmett Till, 1955, was lynched after an allegation involving a white woman. Later, recanted elements of her story underscored the deadly script. All right. The Scottsboro Boys, 1931. 9 black teens falsely accused by 2 white women. Wall to wall media framed them as predators, right? Rosewood, 1923. A white woman's assault claim triggered the destruction of a black town and killings. Press amplified the rumors. Tulsa, 1921. The elevator incident between Dick Rowland and Sarah Page helped spark the massacre of Black Wall Street, later revisited in modern reporting and reparation data debates. 7. Post Loving versus Virginia, 1967. Even after interracial marriage was legalized, stigma persisted. Coverage documents how law changed while culture lagged. 8. White feminine innocence. White feminine innocence. All right. In true crime news, patterns where proximity to white women cast black men as suspicious before facts even emerge. Example, the Central Park 5 media arc. 9, online dating data. We talked about that, 2009 and 2014. So strong race penalties for black men across women of multiple groups. So we already covered that. Pew's intermarriage work. Acceptance grew, but attitudes still diverge, and black men's intermarriage patterns remain uniquely scrutinized. All right. Asian media blackface controversies. Okay. Japan and Korea. Right. Normalizing anti black caricature, shaping dating perceptions towards black men. Research on Asian American women's radicalized dating preferences or racialized dating preferences links internalized racism or status desire to weaker preference for black men, right? It varies by empowerment, okay? South Asian colorism in marriage markets, all right? Quote unquote, the fair preference, right? Saturates matrimonial ads and pop culture, indirectly stigmatizing pairings with darker skinned black people. So you see this even in a lot of their media in Asian markets and communities in Japan, Korea, things like that, where they're already kind of, again, imagery is a big deal to the brain, right? So they're already kind of pumping out some of this information through the media. Indian media's long colorism arc, all right? Keeps fair equals desirable. Scripts in circulation, right? The lighter your skin is, right? The more lighter you are, the more desirable you are. You see this across Asian cultures as well, affecting family gatekeeping around partners. 15, reports on racist attacks against Africans in India surface broader anti black sentiment that bleeds into dating stigma. Latin America, Spanish language TV's blackface erasure patterns, right? Afro-Latino underrepresentation shape how some Latino families read black male partners, all right? No fucking secret, right? There's a big sort of racial divide in terms of like, what's desirable, what's undesirable, right? Between even the Latin American community and the African American community, right? Brazilian telenovelists, historic underrepresentation, stereotyping of black people frames interracial couples with suspicion or novelty, right? You guys, you passport brothers, you guys are going to all these different countries, and I understand you're just trying to find a different quality of woman, but you're going to countries where a lot of these countries also have prejudice and sort of like historical programming towards against black men as well. All right. So it's like, where can you really escape? I'm not mad at you guys for trying to broaden your diversity, but this stuff is worldwide. All right. U.S. Latino media gap studies, persistent stereotyping and whitening pressures reinforce anti-black biases in casting and storytelling. All right. A lot of times, this is why I don't mess with other races. They have intriguing stuff and beautiful women, but there's nothing for me. So it's not worth the effort. Yeah, I get that. So it says black focused dating apps emerge after reports of bias on mainstream platforms, a market response to discriminatory experiences. Yeah, they got the black app, right, which is a really good dating app. But when you go on the black app, you see everybody and a mama on there. You got the whites on there, the Asians, the Latinos, right? It's not even really the black app. That shit is just a regular dating app. It's just called the black app. All right. So we're going to go into a deep dive. All right. And looking into the different groups, racial groups of women, and some of the history that could be influencing some of this prejudice against black men in dating. So Emmett Till as the archetype. All right. Till's murder for an alleged store interaction demonstrates how a mere rumor involving a white woman could equate to a death sentence for a black boy. Right. Legal walls around love. Before 1967, anti-miscegenation laws criminalized marriage. The Lovings exile and Supreme Court win show how the state policed black man's intimacy with white women. I think that people on there might be specifically looking for a black partner, though. I installed it for like a week. Too many big women on there and pretty much hammer um, interracial stereotype. Got you. I see what you're saying. Cinema as propaganda. The Birth of a Nation crystallized the black male predator, white damsel trope, which was screened by the Klan and helped drive its 1920s membership boom, normalizing violent policing of interracial desire. Town level pogroms via allegation. Rosewood's destruction began with a white woman's assault claim. Newspapers amplified panic, showing how media can escalate vigilante protection of white womanhood. Jack Johnson's public punishment. When a famous black man loved white women, the system found tools like the Mann Act to cage him. The coverage and prosecution made his relationships criminal news. So Asian women, anti-black caricature in East Asian media, K-pop acts, and Japanese TV blackface scandals keep caricatures in public view, shaping social attitudes that black men are jokes or others baggage that can enter into dating context. Online preference patterns plus internalized bias. Empirical work links some Asian American women's dating choices to internalized racism. Okay, status dynamics, which can depress interest in black men's absent countervailing empowerment. Imported hierarchies. Scholars note East Asian societies historically absorbed Western racial hierarchies post-war. Korean contexts show how anti-black stereotypes circulated and lingered in pop media. So a lot of the Asian community inherited a lot of the sort of like colonial racial hierarchy sort of theology, right, into their systems as well. All right. So a lot of the Asian women, not all, but they tend to lean more towards, the white is right? The black men are not good, right? And it's so interesting because you see a lot of black guys, and I'm going to talk, right? My wife is Chinese, and we actually met on the black app, go figure. But, it's interesting how a lot of black men, right, we go after Asian women and stuff like that, but a lot of the Asian women want the white guys, right? So it's like, a lot of times black brothers, they go after what really is not even really for them, but I get it. You want what you want, you like what you like, but a lot of the times when you try to step outside your race and go to other cultures, man, they're championing other cultures, right, over the black man. So these imported hierarchies, right? Social media harassment ecosystems. The Oxford study hoax-seeded misogynistic pile-ons about interracial dating choices, cross-pollinating anti-black and sexist tropes in the common commentariat. So Hispanic and Latino women, erasure and blackface in Spanish language TV, years of Afro Latinx absence, blackface in telenovelas and variety shows foster a cultural landscape where coupling with black men is framed as deviant or comic relief. So they're looking at, a lot of these Hispanic, these Latino cultures, like if you're with a black man, it's like comical, right? They're like, are you fucking serious? Underrepresentation research, content analysis, and industry reports document whitening, stereotypes, and limited Afro Latina visibility. Background noise that primes families to read black male partners through suspicion. All right, Brazil's telenovela canon. Brazilian soap operas historically sidelined black leads. When present, the roles often reinforce subservience, affecting public imagination about black men as romantic protagonists. Right? Indian, South Asian women, colorism as a marital filter, right, through matrimony, indirectly stigmatizing darker partners. All right, this is in India. Pop culture reinforcement, from fairness cream marketing to recent films critiquing colorism, Indian media has long tied desirability to lightness. So this shit is global, right? From India and them sort of glamorizing, right, lighter skin tones, fairer skin tones, to acceptability and rightness, to Asia, where they have these imported hierarchies, right? From South America and Brazil, right? In the Latino community, and even in the Mexican community, right? Where you have these different soap operas where, the black leads and even the black people that they have, this prejudice against the black man, in interracial relationships is not just in America, brothers. All right. I know a lot of times you guys are thinking, well, if I go over here, it'll be better, man. If I go over here, these women will treat me so right. No, actually, you're going to go to a different country and they're going to treat your ass the same, if not worse. Because if you don't know the fucking language, right? And a lot of these families in these other countries and stuff like that, they're tight. All right. So you're not just going against one person when they're not interested. You're going against the whole fucking family reunion, right? So the black man is in a really unique situation. I think he's the only fucking guy that really has to deal with this shit, right? Yeah, other cultures, yeah, just stuff can be said about white men and stuff can be said about Asian men and Hispanic men, but it's not as negatively charged and polarizing like it is towards the black man, and it's not pushed in the media, as strongly in these different places. So this shit is global. All right, brothers. So you guys that can't wait to graduate high school so you can go be a passport bro and you're going to go overseas and life is going to be so much better for you as a black man, right? You're going to get all that love. Be careful, man. Be careful, because from what I'm reading, man, this shit is all over, right? They don't want you guys, you black guys, dealing with their women all over the fucking world. All right. It's not just America. You're dealing with this shit globally. So, Indian, South Asian women, real world hostility towards Africans. News cycles on attacks against African students in India reveal wider anti black attitudes that can map onto dating marriage resistance, right? Across groups, cross cutting, news sensationalism, right? To moral panic, right? Historical cases from Scottsboro to Rosewood to Tulsa show how allegations involving women became headlines that sanctioned mass punishment of black men and black communities. Platform level bias in modern dating. Okay, Cupid's long running analysis captured lowered reply matches rates for black men. All right. Black centered apps arose as a corrective signal. Intermarriage rising, stigma lingers. Pew documents growth in interracial marriage, but approval data also surface ambivalence. Context for why black men's relationships still draw scrutiny. Family honor, status narratives. Studies and reports show some Latino and South Asian families policing daughters' choices via status, color, caste talk bias that can target black male partners, right? Status, right? That's a big one. You bring this black guy into the family, how is that going to, you know, how is our family and how's that going to impact our family's legacy, right? And your status in the world, right? Because a lot of this is about social status and social desirability. How is the community going to look at you when you're parading around with the fucking African or a black man, you know? Global media feedback loops from East Asian blackface incidents to Latin women whitening of screens. Transnational media exports circulate anti-black tropes, shaping how women outside and inside the black community prejudge black men as partners. Yeah, man. So this shit, it's wild. It's wild. All right. So interracial relationships, at the end of the day, LMS, looks, money, status. Looks and status are more important. If it may be status over looks in Asian countries, especially older generations, right? Yeah. So, from my opinion, from all this research and this data, man, for you black brothers, you know, date who you want to date, love who you want to love, but it's for the lack of knowledge that the people are destroyed. All right. So educate yourself. Educate yourself if you're dating interracially. From my experiences, my wife being from China, she didn't understand a lot of the black history between African Americans and white people outside of what she might have saw on TV. But in China, everything is so controlled. Okay. So she's not going to get all the details and all the information like a Chinese American would, right, in the public school system, right? So she's going to gravitate more to what the media and the imagery that are shown to her in China, right? As the black man being the criminal, black people are bad, right? They see all the negativity around black men in the media in China. Okay. So even in China, they're not promoting you niggas. All right. So when me and her got married, it was really difficult because she would gravitate to more dominantly white communities and environments. I'm from Detroit, right, where it's mostly black, but I'm flexible where I can live in the suburbs, all right. But I prefer to live in environments where it's a little bit more of a mixture. Okay. But for her, she, had difficulties, sort of like believing that, you could live in a black community and, you could be safe. All right. They don't even believe, a lot of people coming from China, like that I can live amongst black people and I'll be safe. I'll be protected. I'll be embraced. All right. So she would gravitate towards some of these dominant white, areas. And I have racial trauma coming from the military and my experiences. So I kind of lean away from environments that are all white. I don't prefer to live in those type of environments. All right. If I don't see some enough black people or Latinos and Asians, like everybody, I just really suspicious of those type of communities because anytime you get, in this country, in this world, you get racial groups where they have the majority of the numbers, right? They tend to sort of like, in my opinion, like if you're living in an all Mexican community or if you're living in an all white community or you're living in an all Asian community and you're like the only black person there, they tend to like unconsciously like ostracize you, right? Even consciously, where they do real subtle shit, right? To kind of make you feel like, well, who are you? Or they might give you like weird body language, like, pay attention. Like, in my opinion, in my experience, I'm 40, so I fucking lived, right? Military, a lot of times where you're in communities that's dominated by non-black groups, you know, they don't really feel comfortable with you there. It's like you might have a few that kind of like, have black friends, maybe they were in the military or maybe they grew up in the school or something like that. But a lot of times they escape to those environments to get away from niggas. All right. So she would move to a lot of these dominant white areas, and I would just be really uncomfortable, right? She's fucking reaching out to all the white people in the area, and she's friends with all these white folks, and I don't know them, like I'm not gonna discriminate against them and say I don't want to get to know them, but a lot of times, they're like, who the fuck is he? Who is this dude? Well, you got a black guy, they all these different stereotypes, and people who are from America, we know what the fuck is going on, right? When you coming from different countries, you get bits and pieces of things. They can kind of control the narrative. The governments can control what you see on TV in China. They can control probably what you see in Mexico and Brazil and Japan and Korea and India. So you may not get the full story. See, but in America, we get all this shit raw, right? Now they're starting to kind of, erase some of the history and things like that. But growing up, in America, we get the real, right? The reality. So when you're dealing with an interracial relationship, black man, and especially if you're dealing with someone who's from natively born from a different country and they just happen to move to America at 15, 20, 30, you have to expect that they're not going to understand like you do the knowledge of the races and the racism in this country. All right. So they're going to come here. And when you're talking about your black experience and just the realities that you have to deal with, they might look at you as negative. All right. When you're in these interracial relationships with people who are not really native from this country, they're going to feel like you're negative. They're going to feel like they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it. All right. Because a lot of them have been sort of like infantized. Okay. So they're going to come here like, oh my God, that's too negative. Not all white people are like that. Randy, you're being negative. That's not how it is. John and Bill, and Jane, they have a black friend and their nanny's black. They're good people. You're going to feel like when you're dealing with a lot of interracial relationship women who are coming from cultures that are not, and they're not natively born in America, they're going to try to frame your black experiences as negativity. All right. And because for them, they don't really have that reality, right? If I'm fucking Chinese, I'm not dealing with a lot of I'm getting some prejudice from white folks, but not that much shit. The white dudes, they want me. Shit, I got damn near 100 white guys on my app. I remember when I met my wife, she was showing me on her dating app, like, look, all these people that are liking me, Randy, because it would ding on the black app. I mean, just hundreds and hundreds of fucking men, right? And white guys, all kind of fucking races, right? So their experience of whiteness in America is different, right? They're desired, so they're like, shit, I'm popping, nigga. What you mean? White people can be bad against black people? Shit, they love me, Their experience is all distorted and shit, So don't get mad at them about that. Pick and choose someone that aligns and understands your story. Don't beat them up and abuse them and shit and get mad at them. Not that you would do that, but I'm just saying sometimes And this is just men in general. When you feel like you love a woman and y'all together and you're not being understood, you might get emotional and show out and shit. Find you somebody who understands, unless she's willing to understand over time, but just expect she's not going to get what the fuck you're going through. All right. She's not. So it's probably not in your best interest to dump to your Chinese wife or your damn Brazilian wife or your Indian wife all your black history, unless she's very interested and willing to learn. It's probably better you talk to your therapist, all right, or you go talk to people who are in America about those experiences, because these different cultural groups of women, they're already programmed to look at white people as they're clear. Right? They're safer. They're making more money. You guys, you black people are the ones that committing the crime. So they're already, these different nationalities and different countries of these women, they're already looking at white is right, black is bad. So when they might have a little bit of a fetish interest in you, but you're not going to convince them otherwise unless they're willing to learn history and to see that all people have, good and bad sides. It's not just this polarizing black is bad, white is right shit. All right. But don't think you're going to go leave America and you're going to go across the world and you're going to find an interracial relationship. And it's like, oh, everything's going to go perfect. Everything is good. They understand me, Absolutely not. It's going to be difficult. Me and my wife had to go to counseling, man. We're still in fucking counseling, trying to really, and I had to accept, like, Randy, you can't talk to this woman a lot about your experiences being a black dude. And we first moved into this neighborhood in Ladera Ranch. Ladera Ranch is basically a community of fucking $1 million houses, all right? And she bought this house and we were coming from Irvine and we were slowly moving stuff into the house, and she had this neighbor, right, that was renting a house next door. It was just like a Spanish lady. Sometimes Spanish people look white. She looked like a white lady to me. I don't know. You choose. So I, I don't have no beef with anybody. All right. I'm prior military. I'm cultured, right? I would like to think so. So it's like, shit, it's hard to be, black and racist in the Marine Corps because everybody's fucking white, right? So you just, as you're, and like I said, growing up in Detroit, I wasn't programmed with a lot of like anti-white, anti-Mexican. I wasn't programmed with that shit. All right. You just lived your life. All right. So what my man say? Black men pretty much don't have looks in the eyes of other races and certainly not status. They try to a degree, but because of the Belt and Road Initiative trade and arguably modern day exploitation of Africa, not in a good way at least. Right? I see what you're saying. Yeah, so when I moved here, we're moving all the furniture and getting stuff in. We were still staying in Irvine, but we were moving, things into the house, and we wasn't living in the house. We would move stuff in here and there. And this lady, she's like I want to say she was Hispanic, but she looked like a white lady. Had to be like in her mid-40s, something like that. She had two kids, a little boy. I want to say like two boys, and we have our stepdaughter. She's, I want to say back then she was like about 7, something like that. And we would come in, move in some of the stuff, and I guess her sons would see our my stepdaughter. So when kids see each other, man, they want to play. They're curious. They're bouncing around off the fucking walls and shit, right? So when we started moving into this house, into this neighborhood, the neighbor would have her son come, like, we have like a gate, around our house. So she would have him come up banging on the door, asking can our daughter go over to his house and hang out in his room. I tell my wife, like, hell no, he's not going over to this dude house, hanging out in this fucking room. Like, we gotta know the parents, we gotta get to know, we don't even know who the mom is. We don't know who the dad is. We're not gonna we haven't even moved in. Right. I'm not gonna have my daughter, even though she's not my blood daughter, but she's my stepdaughter, right? I'm not gonna, oh yeah, go ahead and go over there up in this room. Like, fuck no. Like, we got to get to know you at least as parents. And there's a way you do things, right? That's how I was raised. All right. I wasn't rude about the shit. I was just telling my wife, like, nah, it's probably better we get to know them, right? So he would come over and he's banging on the door, asking her to come over, and I just kind of felt bad. I'm like, damn, I don't want to hurt the little boy feelings. They're all young, 6, 7, whatever. So I took it upon myself. I went over to their house. This was one day after church. I was like, let me talk to the neighbor to kind of just explain to her, like, hey, how about we get to know each other? How about, we kind of get to know each other as parents before, our kids start doing play dates. I don't really feel comfortable with my stepdaughter going over, just kind of break it down, and I guess my logic was like, why bring the wife into this? I could just, tell her. So I go over to this lady's house, And and to kind of give you guys context, she was really like uncomfortable, that my wife, and I had a baby on the way. And she's like, "You guys are not married." And she's always say things like, "How does your mom?" She used to say things to my wife when the little times we did like interact. We didn't really know each other, but we have like little, how you have like brief interactions, like when you might be leaving, they're like standing out in the yard and shit, and they might kind of catch you or something like that. But I used to notice every time she would talk to me and my wife, man, she would never make eye contact with me. She would never make eye contact with me. She would be looking at my wife, talking to her. I'll be standing right there. That woman would not pay me no fucking mind. So I was like, all right, this is she got some trauma or something. I'm a therapist, right? So I'm always trying to approach things from like a wise mind. I'm like, okay, maybe she got trauma, but it still kind of was like a red flag to me. I'm like, damn, why she ain't looking at me? So she used to make my wife used to tell me, like, yeah, every time I go and take things to the house, the neighbor, she's always saying, like, oh, you're not married. You guys are not married. You got a baby coming. What does your mom think about that? What does your mom think about that? And I already thought that was a red flag. I'm like, why is she, even if you got your own values around marriage and pregnancy and stuff like that, it's not your job to parent and sort of like give these sort of like suggestions and parent other fucking people, right? Other adults, right? And plant these ideas in people's mind, all right? Clearly, ideally you want to be married before you have a kid, all right? But I just feel like her like leading with that in conversation with my wife just for me was like a negative, all right? It's like she's not thinking like, damn, like how did you guys meet? How did you guys, you guys, are a great family, or just, hey, well, how do you guys, just real, just, she was kind of just going towards her values, I felt like. So I go over there just to kind of explain to her, like, look, I don't want my stepdaughter coming over there without us kind of getting to know each other as parents and things like that. And yeah, she don't have to get to know me. It's just at least my wife and I having some felt sense of who this woman is, because I'm not gonna have our daughter going over to her fucking son's house. So we had a conversation. I wish I could have recorded the fucking conversation. I thought I did a great job. Just normal tone, nothing, no big deal. This woman got so offended. She felt like I was being mean to her because I was telling her, like, I don't think it's okay for the son just to come over and bring our daughter over, and we don't really know you. I think maybe we should get to know you first, and then we can set something up. Oh, I feel like you're being mean to me. Completely exaggerated. We only talked like all of 3 minutes, like completely exaggerated the situation, like try to make it seem like I was being mean to her. And that's another thing when you're dealing black men with just different racial groups, especially if they're like bilingual and shit. Depends on who they are. I don't want a broad stroke, but be careful when you're dealing with different, nationalities of women. All right. And especially if they're like Spanish speaking and fucking all these different languages and stuff, it's almost like you can't even talk to them about certain things depending on who they are, their value system, their belief system, because you got some really good bilingual people out there, all right? But you know for lack of knowledge, my people are destroyed. Pay attention, because my wife was like, damn, Randy, why didn't you even bring me with you? You should have brought me with you. I was just thinking I can just have a conversation. Military people, shit, we talk to women and men all the fucking time. Like, big deal. But when you're dealing with like civilians and you're a black man, be careful with talking to these different cultural groups, especially if they're older and you're by yourself. Take your wife with you, if you can. Take another woman with you if you can. You want to have like, it's like these are the times that we're fucking living in. Like, you can't even talk to a lot of these different racial groups, especially if they're not native from here, by yourself, because they might twist up shit. So make a long story short, man, she tried to blow it up like I was being mean to her because I was telling her, like, it's kind of like a violation of our boundaries, just having our daughter go over there and we don't really know each other. I think it would be more appropriate if we, kind of do like a parenting, get to know each other, then we can kind of set something up. She took that offended, me basically just kind of setting a boundary with her and just kind of her if we can do like a get to know each other. Told my wife, okay, because I was working at the time, so I don't go to the house to drop stuff off as much as my wife did, so she would see her more. He better not come back over here again, or I'm going to call the police on him. Mind you, she got a recorder at her house, so I'm pretty sure she recorded the whole conversation. Nothing I said was offensive to this woman, at all. I don't want him coming over here again, or, I'm going to call the police. Like, just blew the shit up into like nothing. That shit pissed me off, man. I was just like, see this, and it's like, it's so hard as a black man to not be fucking prejudiced, right? It's so hard not to be racist, right? Like you want to be, especially come out the military, like you want to be, fair, and you want to look at different nationalities and different groups with respect and shit like that. But sometimes it's like you motherfuckers ask for it, man. Like you ask for this reality where just black people just don't want to deal with your motherfucking ass, right? They try to be respectful, they try to do things in a professional way, they try to approach you with grace, right? And a lot of you motherfuckers just asked for it, all right? So I just listened to her. I was like, all right, she don't want me to go over there. I didn't really have a need to fucking go over there, all right? I didn't even want to move in this community. This was my wife's idea. So what the fuck am I gonna go to your house for? I barely want to even be in our fucking house, right? So I'm like, okay, there's no problem for me, no sweat. So it just made, even before we fully moved in, like my experience of Ladera Ranch and just Orange County, this particular area, just salty. Like I was like, like I was like, damn, man, we gotta leave Irvine, move into this fucking house. And then me and my girl will get into arguments because she wants me to feel comfortable, but she doesn't understand black history, right? She doesn't understand. And Spanish people, you motherfuckers don't like black people, all right? Not all of you. It's about 50-50, all right? You know what the fuck you're doing, all right? And a lot of times you guys align with the white dominant society where you play. I just read the research, all right? So yeah, man, it was so awkward, man. I think I stayed in Irvine and continued paying for the lease by my damn self in there. When she moved into the house, I would just stay in Irvine, man. I was like, man, I don't even want to move into that fucking house. Who wants to live somewhere where your neighbors are threatening the police on you, all because you're trying to protect your children and set a boundary and just do things appropriately, right? So thank God she eventually ended up moving out. And guess who moved the fuck in right when she moved out? A black and Hispanic couple. Black dude was cool as the other side of the fucking pillow. And we would talk to our pastor about it, and we would pray. And I was like, God, you work in mysterious ways, man. Like remove like a negative ass influence and then brought in an interracial couple, man. They didn't stay long. When he moved out, I was just like, damn it, like shit. Like you can't have so much of a good thing in the suburbs, man. It's like, I thought me and this brother was going to have a good relationship. I was like, damn, I hope he stayed longer. Man, that motherfucker moved out. I was just like, damn, I hope whoever move in there, it ain't just, man, I'm telling you. So just the realities that we deal with, man, as black men. He says, yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't want a daughter going to a boys' room anyway, to be honest. And he says that's what they use to justify their prejudice. What black people can notice too. The difference is when you do, we're cut off from power, beauty, etc. The non-blacks are pretty much purifying their power, beauty networks until they get their wake-up call when they want us to march with them. Yeah, so like right now, the Hispanic community got the heat turned up on them now, right? Now they see how black folks felt during Jim Crow, right? Where everywhere you went, you was a target just by being black. It's pretty much like the same thing what these Latinos are dealing with. Everywhere I go, ICE is on my ass because I'm Hispanic, right? And you would think these experiences would make us stronger, right? As a black and brown community, but it's not. It's not. I'm praying for you guys. All right, I ain't gotta necessarily like what the fuck is going on, or like you, right? To just or hate you, right? But I can still pray for you, you know what I mean? So I try not to have no hate in me at all, right? Because I look at all this shit as temporary, all right? And I try to go off of God's word, but just wanted to share with you guys that story, man. And just like, even when you're trying to do the right thing as a black man, be careful of these different culture women around you. You thinking they're cool. She's white, man. She's cool, man. It's my homegirl. We went to Element Bonnie, man. We go back, man. I don't give a fuck how far you go back. If you black, and if all that white girl got to say is whatever she want to fucking say, and you're done. So you better have cameras. You better have recordings. And these times, protect your fucking self, black man. All right. So that's all I had, man. I ain't gonna talk y'all to death. I know y'all watching Ice Show Speed eating ice cream and shit, right? Y'all gonna show up by the thousands for that shit. You're not gonna really show up for this knowledge, and that's all right because that's between you and God. But all right, interracial relationships,